A spaceship hurtles through the void of an uncharted galaxy. A lone captain, stranded on the hostile planet of Zara'k, 5, where ancient secrets hold the power to save or destroy the stars. Will Captain Alex Carter survive the relentless hunters and uncover the truth hidden in the glowing forests? Or is this just the beginning of a war that could consume the galaxy? Step into the adventure that awaits. If this story has sparked your curiosity and left you on the edge of your seat, there's so much more to explore. We'd love for you to join us on this journey. Subscribe to the channel for daily videos that take you to worlds you've never seen. Become part of a community of adventurers today. The bridge of the explorer buzzed with tension, a hive of controlled chaos under the flickering red lights. Alarms blared in a relentless cacophony, casting an ominous glow over the crew as they scrambled to their stations. Captain Alex Carter stood at the heart of it all, his piercing blue eyes fixed on the view screen. The Andromeda galaxy unfurled before them, an endless tapestry of stars and swirling nebulae. But its beauty was a distant thought now. They were deep in uncharted space, and something had gone horribly wrong. "Captain, sensors are picking up anomalous readings," Lieutenant Ramirez called out from the science station, his voice tight with urgency. "Specify," Alex replied, his tone steady but laced with an edge of alertness. "Unknown energy signatures, closing fast." It looks like, before Ramirez could finish, the ship jolted violently. The deck shuddered beneath their feet, and a console erupted in a shower of sparks. Alex gripped the armrests of his command chair to steady himself, his jaw tightening. "Shields up," he barked. "Evasive maneuvers." Ensign Patel, the helmsman, worked the controls with frantic precision. The Explorer banked sharply to starboard, engines whining in protest, but it was too late. A barrage of energy blasts slammed into the hull, rocking the ship like a toy in a storm. The acrid stench of burning circuits filled the air, stinging Alex's nostrils. "Direct hit to the port side," Commander Lee, the first officer, shouted over the chaos. "Shields at 60%. Return fire," Alex ordered, his voice cutting through the din. "And get me a visual on those attackers." The view screen flickered, then stabilized, revealing sleek, angular ships with a menacing design. Their hulls gleamed like polished obsidian, reflecting the starlight, and they darted through space with a predatory grace. Alex's mind raced. These weren't any vessels he recognized from Earth's archives or its allies. "Captain, they're not responding to hails," Communications Officer Nguyen reported, her brow furrowed with worry. Another volley struck the Explorer, and the lights dimmed, plunging the bridge into a momentary twilight. The ship groaned under the strain, a deep, metallic wail that sent a shiver down Alex's spine. "Engine room reports critical damage," Lee said, his face pale in the emergency lighting. "We're losing power fast." Alex's mind churned through options. They couldn't outrun these attackers, and their weapons weren't making a dent. Their only chance was to find a safe haven. "Scan for nearby planets," he commanded. "We need to make an emergency landing." "Zara'k, 5 is within range," Ramirez replied, his fingers flying across the console. "It's habitable, but the terrain's rough, dense forests, mountainous regions, unstable weather patterns." "It's our best shot," Alex decided, his voice resolute. "Set course for Zara'k 5. Prepare for crash landing protocols." The Explorer limped toward the planet, its hull battered by the relentless enemy fire. Each impact sent tremors through the ship, and Alex could feel the systems failing one by one. Shields, weapons, propulsion. He gripped his chair tighter, his knuckles whitening. He had to get his crew to safety, no matter the cost. "Entering atmosphere," Patel announced, his voice strained as the ship bucked against the turbulent skies of Zara'k 5. Through the view screen, Alex caught fleeting glimpses of the planet's surface. Jagged mountains piercing the clouds, vast forests aglow with an eerie bioluminescence, and shimmering lakes that mirrored the twin suns overhead. It was a breathtaking sight, but there was no time to admire it. "Brace for impact," Alex shouted, his voice ringing out over the bridge. The Explorer struck the ground with a deafening crash, skidding across the alien terrain in a violent cascade of dirt, metal, and uprooted vegetation. The bridge became a maelstrom of smoke, sparks, and the piercing screech of rending hull plates. Alex's body slammed against his restraints, the breath knocked from his lungs. Then, with a final, bone-jarring thud, the ship came to a shuddering halt. Silence fell, broken only by the hiss of leaking coolant and the faint groans of the injured. Alex's ears rang, and his vision blurred, but he forced himself to focus. He was alive. He unstrapped himself from his chair and staggered to his feet, coughing in the smoke-filled air. Status report. He croaked, his throat raw. Lee was already at the consoles, his face smudged with soot. Life support's holding, for now. Engines are offline. Multiple hull breaches. Most of the crew are unconscious or injured. Alex nodded, his expression grim. We need to secure the area and figure out our next move. I'll go outside, scout for resources or a way to send a distress signal. Captain, that's too dangerous, Lee protested, his eyes wide. We don't know what's out there. Someone has to do it, Alex said firmly. You're in command until I get back. Keep everyone safe. Without waiting for further argument, he grabbed his plasma rifle from the weapons locker and headed for the airlock. His heart pounded, adrenaline surging through his veins, but he pushed the fear aside. He was a captain. His crew depended on him. Stepping out of the wrecked ship, Alex was immediately struck by the alien splendor of Zara'k 5. The air was thick with the scent of exotic flora, a strange blend of sweetness and something sharp, almost metallic. The forest encircling the crash site pulsed with a soft, blue-green glow, its trees and plants alive with bioluminescence. It was mesmerizing, but Alex couldn't let his guard down. This was a hostile world, and he was alone. He activated his wrist-mounted scanner, its faint hum cutting through the ambient sounds of the wilderness. The device searched for signs of civilization, resources, or a viable signal point, but the readings flickered erratically, likely disrupted by the planet's unique electromagnetic fields. He'd have to rely on his instincts. As he ventured deeper into the forest, the alien soundscape enveloped him. Distant calls of unseen creatures, the rustle of glowing leaves, and the occasional snap of a twig underfoot. Every muscle in his body tensed, his senses heightened to a razor's edge. A low growl rumbled through the trees, stopping him cold. His heart leapt into his throat as he raised his rifle, scanning the shadows. From the underbrush emerged a creature straight out of nightmare. A massive, six-legged beast with bioluminescent stripes streaking its sleek, muscular frame. Its eyes glowed with a predatory hunger, and its claws, long, curved, and razor-sharp, dug into the earth as it stalked closer. Alex squeezed the trigger, a plasma bolt sizzling through the air. The shot grazed the creature's shoulder, but it dodged with uncanny agility, its movements a blur of light and shadow. It lunged, and Alex dove to the side, rolling across the forest floor. The beast's claws raked the ground where he'd stood, leaving deep furrows in the soil. He fired again, this time striking its flank. The creature roared, a guttural, bone-rattling sound that echoed through the forest, but it didn't falter. Instead, it charged with renewed fury, its jaws snapping inches from his face. Alex stumbled backward, firing a barrage of shots, but the beast's hide was tough, absorbing the plasma with frustrating resilience. It reared up, poised for a killing blow, its claws glinting in the bioluminescent light. Alex braced himself, knowing he couldn't outrun it. But just as the creature lunged, a blur of motion streaked from the trees. A figure landed between Alex and the beast, graceful and powerful. It was a humanoid alien, tall and muscular, with skin that shimmered like polished obsidian under the forest glow. Her eyes burned with an inner fire, and she wielded a staff crackling with electric blue energy. With a swift, fluid strike, she drove the staff into the creature's side. A burst of light flared at the impact, and the beast staggered, disoriented. She struck again, a precise blow to its head, and it collapsed to the ground, its body twitching before going still. Alex stared at his savior, his rifle still raised, his chest heaving. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice rough with exertion. The alien turned to face him, her expression unreadable but intense. "I am Zara'k, warrior of the Zalthar," she said, her voice deep and resonant, carrying an authority that matched her presence. "And you are trespassing on our land." Alex lowered his rifle slightly, his finger still hovering over the trigger. "I didn't choose to be here. My ship was attacked, and I crashed." Zara'k's glowing eyes narrowed, studying him. "Attacked by whom?" "I don't know," Alex admitted, frustration seeping into his tone. "They came out of nowhere. Unknown ships, advanced tech. I need to contact my people or repair my ship." "You will come with me," Zara'k declared, her tone brooking no dissent. "The elders will decide your fate." Alex hesitated. The idea of being taken prisoner didn't sit well with him, but he was out of options. Alone, injured, and unfamiliar with this planet, he couldn't afford to refuse. Besides, the Zalthar might have resources or answers he could use. "All right," he said, lowering his rifle fully. "Lead the way." As they set off through the forest, Alex couldn't help but notice Zara'k's movements, graceful yet predatory, every step exuding strength and confidence. Her presence was striking, the way her muscles rippled beneath her shimmering skin, the fierce intelligence in her glowing eyes, the subtle elegance of her warrior's stance. Despite the tension, he found himself intrigued. Their uneasy truce was short-lived. A chorus of growls erupted from the trees, closer and more menacing than before. More of the bioluminescent predators emerged, their eyes gleaming with hunger as they encircled the pair, cutting off any retreat. "Looks like we've got company," Alex muttered, raising his rifle again. Zara'k shifted into a combat stance, her staff humming with energy. "We fight together, or we die alone." Alex nodded, a grim smile tugging at his lips. "Together it is." The predators attacked, a coordinated assault from all sides. Alex fired precise shots, each plasma bolt finding its mark, headshots where he could manage them. Beside him, Zara'k moved like a tempest, her staff a blur of light and force. She spun and struck, sending one beast crashing into a tree, then pivoted to block another's claws before they could reach Alex. One creature lunged at Alex from behind, but Zara'k intercepted it midair, her staff slamming it to the ground. Another swiped at her, and Alex blasted it before its claws could connect, the shot sizzling through its skull. Despite their differences, human and Zalthar, stranger and native, they fought in sync, instinctively covering each other's weaknesses. When the last predator fell, they stood amidst a circle of lifeless bodies, their breaths ragged in the stillness. The forest seemed to hold its breath, the glow of the trees casting long shadows over the scene. "Not bad for a human," Zara'k said, wiping a streak of luminescent blood from her staff. A faint note of respect colored her voice. "You're not so bad yourself," Alex replied, a grin breaking through his exhaustion. For a fleeting moment, their gazes locked. Something unspoken flickered between them. Admiration, perhaps, or the first hint of a connection forged in battle. Then Zara'k turned away, her expression hardening once more. "Come," she said briskly. "We must reach the stronghold before nightfall. The forest grows more dangerous in the dark." Alex fell in a step beside her, his mind racing. He'd survived a crash, encountered a deadly predator, and met an alien warrior who'd saved his life, only to become his reluctant ally. But he knew this was just the beginning. Zara'k, 5 held greater mysteries and threats, and he'd need every ounce of his skill, and perhaps Zara'k's strength, to face them. As they trekked deeper into the glowing forest, the twin suns dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of violet and gold. Shadows lengthened across the alien landscape, and Alex stole a glance at Zara'k. Her silhouette stood stark against the bioluminescent trees, a warrior of this strange world. Whatever lay ahead, he sensed she'd be a key part of it, whether as friend, foe, or something more. The forest of Zara'k, 5 seemed to close in around them as Alex and Zara'k continued their trek, the bioluminescent glow from the trees casting long, dancing shadows across their path. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and the faint, sweet tang of alien flora. Every rustle of leaves or distant animal call kept Alex on edge, his plasma rifle gripped tightly in his hands. Zara'k moved with the grace of a predator, her staff humming softly, its energy a reassuring presence in the encroaching darkness. They hadn't spoken much since the encounter with the predators. The silence between them wasn't quite comfortable, but it wasn't hostile either. Alex stole glances at Zara'k, noting the way her muscles shifted beneath her shimmering skin, the fierce determination in her glowing eyes. She was a warrior through and through, and despite their differences, he couldn't help but admire her strength. A sudden, piercing screech tore through the air, snapping Alex out of his thoughts. Before he could react, a blur of motion erupted from the underbrush, a serpentine creature with scales that shimmered like oil on water. It struck with blinding speed, its fangs bared. Alex fired instinctively, but the creature twisted mid-air, dodging the plasma bolt. It hissed, coiling for another strike. Zara'k was faster. She lunged forward, her staff crackling with energy, and drove it into the creature's side. The impact sent a shock wave through the air, and the beast crumpled to the ground, twitching. Breathing heavily, Alex lowered his rifle. "Thanks," he said, his voice rough. "That was close." Zara'k wiped a streak of luminescent blood from her staff, her expression unreadable. "You fight well, human, but you must be quicker. The forest does not forgive hesitation." Alex nodded, a wry smile tugging at his lips. "Noted. I'll try to keep up." For a moment, their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them, a flicker of mutual respect, or perhaps the first thread of trust. Then Zara'k turned away, her gaze scanning the trees. "We must hurry. The stronghold is not far, but nightfall brings worse dangers." They pressed on, their pace quickening. The forest grew denser, the bioluminescent trees weaving a labyrinth of light and shadow. Alex's legs ached, the strain from the crash landing still fresh, but he gritted his teeth and pushed through. He'd been through worse, and now wasn't the time to show weakness. Finally, the trees thinned, revealing the silhouette of a massive structure ahead. The Zalthar stronghold rose from the cliffside like a natural extension of the planet, its towers of stone and metal blending seamlessly with the rock face. Intricate carvings adorned its surfaces, glowing faintly in the twilight, and vine-like bridges connected its upper levels. It was both fortress and work of art, a testament to the Zalthar's mastery of their environment. As they approached the gates, 2 guards stepped forward, their staffs crackling with energy. Their eyes widened at the sight of Alex, and they raised their weapons in unison. "Halt!" one commanded, his voice sharp. "Who is this outsider?" Zara'k stepped forward, her posture straight and commanding. "He is under my protection. I bring him to the elders." The guards exchanged wary glances, their suspicion palpable. "The elders will decide his fate. Enter, but he remains under watch." Alex felt the weight of their stares as they passed through the gates. The settlement buzzed with activity. Zalthar of all ages moved through the streets, some tending to glowing gardens, others sharpening weapons or repairing structures. But as Alex walked by, conversations hushed, and eyes followed him with a mix of curiosity and distrust. He was an anomaly here, a human in a world that clearly had little love for outsiders. They entered a grand hall at the heart of the stronghold. The vaulted ceiling stretched high above, supported by pillars carved to resemble towering trees, their branches intertwining to form a canopy of stone. At the far end, a semicircle of Zalthar elders sat on polished wooden thrones, their expressions stern. The central elder, an aged figure with intricate tattoos covering his face, leaned forward as Zara'k and Alex approached. Zara'k bowed deeply. "Honored elders, I present Captain Alex Carter of the humans. His ship was attacked, and he crashed on our land. I believe he may be of use. The Central Elder's eyes narrowed, his gaze piercing. A human? Here? This is unprecedented. Speak, outsider. Why have you come to Xiron 5? Alex took a steadying breath, choosing his words carefully. I didn't intend to come here. My ship was ambushed by unknown vessels, advanced technology, unlike anything I've seen. I made an emergency landing to survive. I mean your people no harm, but I need help to repair my ship or contact my fleet. A murmur rippled through the elders. One of them, a sharp-featured female with silver-streaked hair, scoffed. Humans are known for their recklessness. How do we know you don't bring danger to our doorstep? Before Alex could respond, a young Zalthar burst into the hall, his chest heaving. Elders, Korrath scouts have been sighted near the perimeter. The room erupted into chaos. The elders exchanged urgent glances, and warriors scrambled to arm themselves. Alex's mind raced. Korrath. He'd heard whispers of them on the outer rim, a ruthless species with a thirst for conquest, their technology rivaling humanity's most advanced fleets. The Central Elder raised a hand for silence. We will deal with this threat. As for the human, Alex seized the opportunity. I have military training. I've fought in battles across the galaxy. Let me help you. The elders hesitated, their expressions conflicted. Zara'k stepped forward, her voice steady. He fought bravely against the forest beasts. His skills could be valuable. After a tense moment, the Central Elder nodded. Very well. But remember, human, your actions will determine your fate here. Prove yourself, or face the consequences. Alex bowed his head. Understood. The hall emptied as warriors rushed to defend the perimeter. Zara'k handed Alex a Zalthar blade, its edge glowing faintly blue. Stay close, she instructed. The Korrath are cunning. They will not hesitate to exploit any weakness. Alex gripped the blade, its weight unfamiliar but reassuring. I'm ready. They joined the Zalthar forces at the perimeter, where the forest met the cliffside. The air hummed with tension, the only sound the distant whine of energy weapons charging. Then, like ghosts emerging from the shadows, the Korrath appeared. Their armor was sleek and black, blending with the night, and their eyes glowed with a cold, calculating light. They moved with precision, their weapons unleashing volleys of energy that scorched the earth and sent Zalthar warriors diving for cover. Alex's training kicked in. He spotted a group of Korrath attempting to flank the Zalthar's left side and shouted a warning. Left flank. They're circling. Zara'k relayed the warning, and the Zalthar adjusted their formation. Together, Alex and Zara'k charged into the fray, their movements a blur of steel and energy. Alex parried a Korrath blade, the impact jarring his arm, then countered with a swift slash across the enemy's midsection. The Korrath staggered, and Alex finished it with a precise thrust. Beside him, Zara'k fought with deadly grace, her staff a whirlwind of light as she felled foe after foe. Despite their efforts, the Korrath pressed forward, their numbers overwhelming. Alex's mind raced for a solution. He noticed a narrow ravine nearby, a potential choke point. Zara'k, he called. If we lure them into that ravine, we can bottleneck their advance. She glanced at the ravine, then back at him, understanding dawning in her eyes. It could work, but it's risky. Trust me, Alex said, his voice steady. For a heartbeat, she hesitated, then nodded. Lead the way. They rallied a group of Zalthar warriors and executed the plan, feigning a retreat to draw the Korrath into the ravine. As the enemy funneled in, the Zalthar unleashed a barrage of energy from above, decimating the Korrath ranks. The tide turned. The remaining Korrath, realizing their disadvantage, retreated into the forest, their parting shots wild and desperate. As the dust settled, the Zalthar cheered, their voices echoing through the night. Alex lowered his blade, his body aching, but his spirit lifted. They had won for now. Zara'k approached, her expression a mix of exhaustion and admiration. Your strategy saved many lives today, human. Alex smiled wearily. Couldn't have done it without you. She tilted her head, a gesture of respect. Then her gaze fell to his arm, where a Korrath blade had left a shallow gash. "You're wounded." "It's nothing," Alex said, but she was already pulling him toward a quiet corner of the stronghold. "Sit," she ordered, retrieving a small vial from her belt. Alex complied, watching as she knelt beside him. Her hands were deft as she applied a cool, soothing salve to the wound. The pain ebbed, replaced by a warmth that spread through his skin. "Thank you," he murmured, suddenly aware of how close she was. Her scent, a mix of earth and something uniquely her, filled his senses. Zara'k's hand stilled, her eyes meeting his. For a moment, the world narrowed to just the two of them, the air thick with unspoken words. Alex's pulse quickened, and he saw a flicker of something, curiosity, or perhaps the beginning of attraction, in her gaze. Then, as quickly as it came, the moment passed. Zara'k withdrew her hands, her expression closing off. "You should rest," she said briskly. "Tomorrow, we will speak with the elders about your ship." Alex nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. "Right, of course." As she walked away, he couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted between them, a fragile bond, forged in the heat of battle and the quiet moments after. But for now, it remained unspoken, a promise of what might come. The first light of dawn crept over the horizon, painting the sky in hues of violet and gold as Alex and Zara'k stood before the elders in the grand hall. The air was thick with the scent of incense and the faint hum of energy from the glowing carvings that adorned the walls. The elders, their faces etched with age and wisdom, regarded the pair with a mixture of hope and caution. "You seek the ancient ruins," the central elder intoned, his voice deep and resonant. "A place of great power and great danger. The path is treacherous, and the ruins themselves are guarded by forces we do not fully understand." Alex shifted his weight, his gaze steady. "We understand the risks, but we have no choice. If there's a chance the technology there can help repair my ship, or defend against the Korrath, we have to take it." Zara'k stepped forward, her posture straight and confident. "We are prepared, honored elders. We will not fail." The elders exchanged glances, then the central elder nodded. "Very well. You will be provided with supplies and guidance. But remember, the ruins are sacred. Take only what you need, and disturb nothing unnecessarily." A younger elder, a female with sharp eyes and a stern expression, handed Zara'k a small, intricately carved device. "This will guide you to the ruins. It is attuned to the energy of the ancients. Follow its light, and it will lead you true." Zara'k accepted the device with a respectful bow. "Thank you, Elder Mara." As they turned to leave, the central elder's voice stopped them. "One more thing, human. The ruins hold secrets not just of technology, but of our past. What you find there may change your understanding of this world, and your own." Alex met the elder's gaze, a flicker of curiosity sparking in his chest. "I'll keep that in mind." The journey began at first light. Alex and Zara'k stood at the edge of the stronghold, their packs laden with supplies, rations of dried meat and nutrient-rich roots, medical kits with healing salves and bandages, climbing gear including ropes and hooks, and weapons. Alex had his plasma rifle slung over his shoulder, its sleek design a stark contrast to the organic curves of Zara'k's staff and the curved blade strapped to her side. The guiding device pulsed softly in Zara'k's hand, its light a steady beacon pointing toward the distant mountains. The path ahead was daunting. The forest stretched for miles, its bioluminescent trees glowing faintly in the early morning light. Beyond the forest lay a vast, treacherous canyon, and further still, the jagged peaks of the mountains where the ruins were said to lie. It would be a journey of days, perhaps weeks, and every step would bring new dangers. As they entered the forest, the air grew cooler, the canopy above blocking out much of the sunlight. The ground was soft and spongy beneath their feet, covered in a carpet of glowing moss. The air hummed with the sounds of unseen creatures, chirps, rustles, and distant howls that set Alex's nerves on edge. His hand never strayed far from his rifle, his pilot instincts honed by years of navigating hostile territories. For hours, they walked in near silence, conserving energy and staying alert. The forest seemed alive, its bioluminescent flora casting eerie shadows that danced across their path. Then, without warning, the ground trembled beneath them. A low, rumbling growl echoed through the trees, growing louder with each passing second. Zara'k's eyes widened. "Tunnel worms," she hissed. "We need to move now." Before Alex could respond, the earth erupted in front of them. A massive, segmented creature burst from the ground, its maw lined with rows of razor-sharp teeth. It towered over them, its body glistening with a sickly green slime, its stench overwhelming. Alex fired a plasma bolt into the worm's open mouth, the blue energy sizzling against its flesh, but it barely flinched. Zara'k darted forward, her staff crackling with energy, and struck the creature's side. The impact sent a shock wave through its body, but it retaliated with a swipe of its tail, sending Zara'k sprawling into the undergrowth. "Zara'k!" Alex shouted, firing again. The worm turned its attention to him, lunging with terrifying speed. He dove to the side, narrowly avoiding its jaws, and scrambled to his feet, adrenaline surging. Zara'k was back on her feet, her blade drawn, its edge gleaming in the dim light. "Aim for the segments," she called. "Their weak points are between the plates." Alex nodded, adjusting his aim. He fired at the gaps between the worm's armored segments, each shot burrowing deep into its flesh. The creature writhed in pain, thrashing wildly, uprooting trees in its agony. Zara'k seized the opportunity, leaping onto its back with the agility of a predator and driving her blade into a vulnerable spot. With a final, shuddering roar, the worm collapsed, its body twitching before going still. Breathing heavily, Alex approached Zara'k, who was wiping slime from her blade with a grimace. "You okay?" She nodded, her chest still heaving. "I've faced worse, but we must be cautious. The forest is full of such creatures." As they continued, the terrain grew more challenging. They crossed rivers of glowing water, their surfaces deceptively calm, hiding swift currents and hidden predators with razor-sharp fins that snapped at their heels. At one point, they encountered a chasm spanned by a rickety bridge of vines and wood, its planks weathered and fraying. The bridge creaked ominously under their weight, swaying with every gust of wind, but they crossed without incident, though Alex's heart pounded with every step, his hands gripping the ropes until his knuckles turned white. By nightfall, they reached a small clearing nestled between towering trees, their trunks pulsing with veins of light. The guiding device pulsed steadily, indicating they were on the right path. Exhausted, they set up camp, building a small fire with dry branches and a flint-like stone Zara'k carried. The flames cast a warm glow, warding off the chill that settled over the forest. As they sat by the fire, the silence between them felt different, less tense, more companionable. Alex broke the quiet first, poking at the fire with a stick. "You know, back on Earth, I used to dream about exploring places like this. Alien worlds, uncharted territories. But I never imagined it would be like this." Zara'k tilted her head, her glowing eyes reflecting the firelight. "What did you imagine?" "Adventure, mostly. Discovering new things, pushing the limits of what we know. But also danger, I guess. The thrill of the unknown." He smiled faintly, the firelight softening the lines of his face. "Though I could do without the giant worms." Zara'k chuckled, a low, melodic sound that surprised him with its warmth. "The forest is part of our world, as much as the mountains or the sky. We learn to live with it, to respect its power." Alex nodded, his gaze distant as he stared into the flames. "Humans are a bit different. We tend to conquer nature, bend it to our will. Sometimes that works, sometimes it backfires spectacularly." "Your people are resilient," Zara'k said thoughtfully, her tone carrying a hint of admiration. "I saw that in the battle. You fight with a fierceness that rivals any Zalthar warrior." "It's in our blood," Alex replied, his voice steady. "We've faced extinction more times than I can count. Wars, plagues, disasters, but we always find a way to survive. It's what makes us human." Zara'k studied him for a moment, her expression unreadable behind the glow of her eyes. Perhaps that is why the ancients left their technology here. They saw something in your kind, something worth preserving. Alex raised an eyebrow, intrigued. You think the ancients knew about humans? It is possible, she said, her voice softening. The elders speak of a time when our people traveled the stars, long before we chose to live in harmony with Zara'k 5. Perhaps they encountered your ancestors. The idea sent a shiver of excitement through Alex, but before he could press further, a distant howl echoed through the trees, sharp and chilling. It was a reminder of the dangers that lurked in the night, cutting their conversation short. They took turns keeping watch, the fire crackling softly as the forest whispered around them, alive with unseen eyes. The next day, they reached the canyon, a vast, yawning chasm that stretched as far as the eye could see, its depths swallowed by shadow. The only way across was a narrow, winding path that clung to the cliffside, barely wide enough for one person. The drop was sheer, plummeting hundreds of feet to a river that roared like a distant thunderstorm, its waters frothing white against jagged rocks. Zara'k led the way, her steps sure and steady, her balance honed by years of navigating Zara'k 5's wilds. Alex followed, his heart in his throat, as loose rocks skittered underfoot, tumbling into the abyss with faint, echoing clatters. The wind whipped around them, tugging at their clothes and threatening to unbalance them, its howl filling his ears. Halfway across, disaster struck. A section of the path crumbled beneath Zara'k's feet, and she slipped, her hand grasping for purchase on the rough stone. Alex lunged forward, catching her wrist just as she began to fall. For a terrifying moment, she dangled over the void, her weight pulling against his grip, their eyes locked in shared panic. "Hold on," Alex grunted, his muscles straining as he braced himself against the cliff. With a final heave, he dragged her back on a solid ground, and they collapsed in a heap, breathless, dust clinging to their clothes. Zara'k's chest heaved as she caught her breath, her hand trembling slightly. "Thank you," she said, her voice shaky but sincere. "I owe you my life." Alex managed a weak smile, his pulse still racing. "Guess we're even now." She met his gaze, and for a moment, something unspoken passed between them. A deepening of trust, perhaps, or the first stirrings of something more. But the moment was fleeting, and they quickly resumed their journey, the path ahead still perilous, the wind a constant threat. After crossing the canyon, they entered a region of jagged mountains, their peaks shrouded in mist that clung to the air like a living thing. The temperature dropped sharply, forcing them to wrap themselves in cloaks made from the thick, fur-like hides of Zara'k 5's creatures. The guiding device pulsed brighter now, its light cutting through the fog, indicating they were close. But the mountains held their own dangers. One evening, as they made camp in a sheltered alcove carved into the rock, a sudden storm swept in, bringing with it howling winds and torrential rain. Lightning cracked across the sky, illuminating the landscape in stark, white flashes, casting long shadows that danced across the stone. They huddled together under a makeshift shelter of branches and hides, their bodies pressed close for warmth as the rain pounded against their cover. The storm raged outside, relentless, but within their small haven, there was a fragile sense of safety. Alex could feel Zara'k's steady breathing beside him, her warmth a comfort in the chaos. "You know," he said softly, his voice barely audible over the wind. "Back home, storms like this are rare. Most of our weather is controlled, predictable. But there's something primal about this. It reminds me that nature can't be tamed." Zara'k turned her head to look at him, her face inches from his, the faint glow of her eyes piercing the darkness. "On Zara'k 5, we live with the storms. They are part of us, as we are part of them. They teach us humility." Their eyes met, and for a heartbeat, the world outside ceased to exist. Alex felt a pull, an inexplicable urge to close the distance between them, his breath catching in his throat. Zara'k's gaze lingered, her expression unreadable before she turned away, breaking the spell. "We should rest," she murmured, her voice steady but quiet. "Tomorrow will be a long day." Alex nodded, though sleep was the last thing on his mind. As the storm raged on, he lay awake, the memory of her closeness burning in his thoughts, a quiet tension settling in his chest. The next morning, the storm had passed, leaving the air crisp and clear, the ground slick with moisture. They continued their ascent, the path growing steeper and more treacherous, loose stones slipping beneath their boots. Just as the sun reached its zenith, they crested a ridge and saw it, the ancient ruins. The structures were unlike anything Alex had ever seen. Towering spires of stone and metal rose from the mountainside, their surfaces covered in intricate carvings that glowed with an otherworldly light, blue, green, and gold intertwining in hypnotic patterns. Arches and bridges connected the spires, forming a labyrinth of pathways suspended in the air, defying gravity. At the center stood a massive dome, its surface shimmering like liquid silver, reflecting the sky in a mesmerizing dance of color. A sense of awe washed over them as they approached, their footsteps echoing on the stone. The air hummed with energy, a low vibration that resonated in their bones, and the guiding device in Zara'k's hand pulsed in time with the ruins' glow. They had arrived, but their wonder was short-lived. From the shadows of the ruins, a group of figures emerged, Korrath scouts, their armor gleaming in the sunlight, their weapons drawn. They had been lying in wait, their presence a silent threat. "Ambush!" Alex shouted, raising his rifle in one fluid motion. Zara'k readied her staff, its tip sparking with energy, her eyes narrowing. They must have followed us. The Korrath attacked with ruthless efficiency, their energy weapons blazing, bolts of red light searing the air. Alex and Zara'k dove for cover behind a fallen pillar, its surface pitted and scarred. They returned fire as best they could, Alex's plasma shots lighting up the ruins, Zara'k's staff strikes sending arcs of energy toward their foes. The battle was fierce, the air filled with the sizzle of plasma, the clash of steel, and the sharp cracks of stone shattering under stray shots. Alex's mind raced. They were outnumbered, and the Korrath were relentless, their movements coordinated and precise. But he noticed something. The ruins' carvings were not just decorative. They seemed to react to the energy blasts, absorbing and redirecting them in faint pulses of light. "Zara'k, the carvings," he called over the din, "they're energy conduits. If we can lure the Korrath into the right spot, we might be able to turn the ruins against them." She nodded, understanding dawning in her eyes. Together, they maneuvered through the ruins, darting between pillars and arches, drawing the Korrath into a narrow corridor lined with glowing symbols. As the enemy pursued, Alex fired a precise shot at one of the carvings. The symbol flared to life, and a surge of energy erupted, a brilliant wave of light engulfing the Korrath in a blinding flash. When the light faded, the Korrath lay motionless, their armor scorched and smoking, wisps of vapor rising from the stone. Alex and Zara'k stood panting, their hearts pounding from the close call, sweat beading on their brows. "That was too close," Alex muttered, wiping his face with his sleeve. Zara'k sheathed her blade, her expression grim. "The Korrath will not stop. They know the value of what lies here." "Then we'd better find it first," Alex said, determination hardening his voice. They stepped deeper into the ruins, the air growing heavier with each passing moment, thick with the scent of ozone and ancient dust. The central dome loomed before them, its surface rippling like water, its edges shimmering in the light. As they approached, the guiding device in Zara'k's hand blazed with light, and the dome's surface parted with a low hum, revealing a hidden entrance framed by glowing runes. With a shared glance, they stepped inside, the door sealing shut behind them with a dull thud. The interior was vast, a cavernous chamber filled with strange machinery, towers of crystal and metal that pulsed with a rhythmic hum, their surfaces etched with patterns that seemed to shift and flow. At the center of the room stood a pedestal upon which rested a small, ornate box, its surface inlaid with gem-like stones that glimmered faintly. Zara'k approached the pedestal, her eyes wide with reverence. This is it, the heart of the ancient's power. Alex joined her, his gaze fixed on the box, curiosity warring with caution. What do you think it is? I do not know, she admitted, her voice hushed. But it is what we came for. As she reached for the box, a voice echoed through the chamber, deep and resonant, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere. Only those who are worthy may claim the legacy of the ancients. Alex and Zara'k exchanged wary glances. Who's there? Alex called, his hand tightening on his rifle, his eyes scanning the shadows. The voice did not answer. Instead, the floor beneath them began to shift, a low rumble vibrating through the chamber. The walls came alive with light, and a series of platforms rose from the ground, each separated by a chasm crackling with arcs of blue energy that snapped and hissed. It's a test, Zara'k realized, her voice steady despite the tension. We must prove ourselves. Alex took a deep breath, his jaw tightening. Then let's not keep the ancients waiting. Together, they began to navigate the platforms, leaping from one to the next with precision and care. The energy below sizzled menacingly, promising a swift end to any misstep, its heat radiating upward. But their movements were synchronized, each covering the other's weaknesses, Zara'k's agility balancing Alex's strength, their trust in each other unspoken but absolute. Finally, they reached the pedestal, their breaths coming in short gasps. Zara'k lifted the box, her hands steady, and the voice spoke again. You have proven your worth. Use the legacy wisely, for it holds the power to create or destroy. The box opened in her hands with a soft click, revealing a small, glowing orb, its surface swirling with colors that defied description. As Zara'k touched it, a surge of knowledge flooded her mind. Visions of ancient technologies, starships soaring through the cosmos, and a time when Zalthar roamed the stars alongside other species, including humans, their ships gleaming side by side. She gasped, stumbling back, her eyes wide with shock. Alex caught her, his hands steady on her shoulders, his voice urgent. What is it? What did you see? The ancients, she whispered, her voice trembling with awe. They were not just Zalthar. They were a coalition, Zalthar, humans, and others. Together, they built wonders and faced great threats. Alex's eyes widened, his mind racing. So, our peoples have a shared history. Zara'k nodded, still processing the revelation, her hand clutching the orb. It seems so. And this orb, it contains the knowledge to repair your ship and more. But it also warns of a coming darkness, greater than the Korrath. Before Alex could respond, the ground trembled violently, a deep groan echoing through the chamber. The ruins shook, and from outside, the sound of explosions reverberated, sharp and staccato. The Korrath, Zara'k said, her voice tense, her grip tightening on the orb. They found a way in. Alex gripped his rifle, his expression hardening. Then we'd better get out of here fast. With the orb secured in Zara'k's pack, they raced back through the ruins, the structure crumbling around them as the Korrath bombardment intensified. Dust and debris rained down, the air thick with the sound of cracking stone. They emerged into the open air just as a massive Korrath warship descended from the sky, its sleek, predatory form casting a shadow over the ruins, its weapons glowing with malevolent intent. Run, Alex shouted, and together they sprinted down the mountainside, the ground exploding behind them in bursts of fire and rock. The warship's cannons roared, each shot tearing apart the ancient structures, sending shockwaves through the earth. They reached the cover of the forest just as the ruins collapsed in a cloud of dust and debris, the spires toppling with a thunderous crash. The warship hovered for a moment, its sensors sweeping the area, then turned and disappeared into the clouds, its mission apparently complete, for now. Alex and Zara'k collapsed against a tree, their breaths coming in ragged gasps, their clothes torn and streaked with dirt. That was too close, Alex muttered, his voice hoarse, his hand shaking slightly. Zara'k clutched the orb tightly, her eyes fierce despite her exhaustion. But we have what we came for. Now, we must return to the stronghold and decipher its secrets. Alex nodded, his mind still reeling from the revelations of the orb, the shared history of their peoples, the promise of ancient technology, the threat of a greater darkness. It was almost too much to process. But one thing was clear, their journey was far from over. As they began the long trek back, Alex glanced at Zara'k. Her face was set with determination, but there was something else in her eyes, a glimmer of hope, perhaps, or the beginning of a deeper connection forged through fire and peril. Whatever lay ahead, he knew they would face it together. And with that thought, a small smile tugged at his lips, a spark of light in the gathering dusk. The air trembled with the roar of destruction as Captain Alex Carter and Zara'k sprinted down the mountainside, their boots slamming against jagged stone. Behind them, the ancient ruins collapsed in a thunderous cascade of dust and debris, obliterated by the relentless cannon fire of a Korrath warship. The sky darkened under its sleek, predatory shadow, the twin suns of Zara'k, 5 swallowed by the haze of smoke. Alex's heart pounded in his chest, his lungs burning, but he didn't dare slow down. In Zara'k's pack, the orb, their hard-won prize from the ruins, bounced with every step, a fragile hope they couldn't afford to lose. "Keep moving," Alex shouted, his voice hoarse as he stole a glance back. The warship's weapons glowed ominously, but it held its fire, perhaps wary of damaging the orb they carried. That hesitation was their only advantage. Zara'k ran beside him, her Zalthar agility propelling her over the uneven terrain with a grace that belied the urgency of their flight. Her glowing eyes darted toward the forest below, a sanctuary of bioluminescent trees that promised cover. "There!" she called, pointing ahead. They plunged into the dense canopy just as a final explosion rocked the mountainside, the shockwave rippling through the glowing leaves. Branches snapped underfoot, their light pulsing faintly as Alex and Zara'k wove through the undergrowth. The warship's hum faded behind them, its sensors thwarted by the thick foliage, for now. They paused, crouching low, their breaths ragged in the stillness. "Too close," Alex muttered, wiping sweat from his brow. His arm ached where a plasma burn had seared his skin during their escape, but he ignored it. "They're not giving up." Zara'k adjusted her pack, her fingers brushing the bulge where the orb rested. "They know its value. We must reach the stronghold before they find us again." Alex nodded, his jaw tightening. "Let's go." The forest was alive with danger as they pressed onward, the bioluminescent glow casting eerie shadows across their path. The air was thick with the sweet, metallic scent of alien flora, mingled with the faint tang of ozone from the Korrath bombardment. Every rustle of leaves or snap of a twig set Alex's nerves on edge, his plasma rifle gripped tightly in his hands. Zara'k moved with silent precision, her staff humming softly, its energy a steady pulse in the darkness. They had been traveling for hours when the first sign of trouble came, a low, mechanical whine cutting through the ambient sounds of the forest. Zara'k halted, her hand shooting up in a silent signal. Alex froze, his ears straining, his pulse quickening. The sound grew louder, a rhythmic buzz that was unmistakably artificial. "Drones," Zara'k whispered, her voice taut with urgency. "Korrath scouts." Alex cursed under his breath. The Korrath weren't taking chances. They deployed aerial drones, likely equipped with thermal or motion sensors. "We need cover," he said, scanning their surroundings. "Somewhere they can't track us." Zara'k's gaze settled on a nearby river, its surface shimmering faintly under the glow of the trees. "The water. It might mask our heat." Without a word, they waded in, the icy current biting at their legs as it rose to their waists, then their chests. The river tugged at them, its pull strong, but they clung to the muddy bank, keeping their heads low. Above, the buzz intensified, and a swarm of small, red-eyed drones swept into view, their lights scanning the forest floor in methodical sweeps. Alex held his breath, his fingers tightening around his rifle, the cold seeping into his bones. Beside him, Zara'k remained still, her glowing eyes narrowed as she watched the drones. The hum lingered, a tense eternity, before finally fading as the machines moved on, their search fruitless. Shivering, they climbed out, water dripping from their clothes. "That was too damn close," Alex said, shaking his head to clear the fog of adrenaline. "We've got to keep moving." Zara'k nodded, her expression grim as she wrung water from her cloak. "The Korrath are relentless. They'll send more." Night deepened as they continued, the forest growing denser, its glowing trees closing in like silent sentinels. The twin suns had vanished, leaving only the bioluminescence to guide them. Fatigue gnawed at Alex's muscles, his earlier wounds throbbing with every step, but he pushed it aside. He'd survived worse, crash landings, ambushes, wars, and he wasn't about to falter now. Then, without warning, a loud crash shattered the silence, followed by the heavy clank of armored boots. A squad of Korrath soldiers burst from the trees, their obsidian armor gleaming in the dim light, their energy rifles glowing with deadly intent. "Run!" Zara'k shouted, and they bolted, branches clawing at their arms and legs as they fled. The Korrath gave chase, their weapons firing in sharp bursts, bolts of red energy sizzling past and igniting patches of glowing moss. Alex ducked as a shot grazed the tree beside him, sending shards of bark flying. They reached a ravine, its steep drop a sheer wall of stone, a dead end. Trapped, they turned to face their pursuers, weapons raised. Alex steadied his rifle, its barrel humming faintly. "Looks like we make our stand here." Zara'k shifted into a combat stance, her staff crackling with blue energy. "Together," she said, her voice steady despite the odds. The Korrath advanced, their movements precise and coordinated, their glowing eyes cold and calculating. Alex fired first, a plasma bolt striking the lead soldier's chest, scorching the armor but not stopping him. Zara'k lunged forward, her staff a blur as she struck another, the impact sending a shockwave that staggered her foe. The fight was brutal and fast. Alex parried a rifle, but with his own weapon, then drove his elbow into the Korrath's faceplate, cracking it. He followed with a point-blank shot, dropping the soldier. Beside him, Zara'k spun and struck, her staff weaving a deadly arc of light, felling two more with swift, precise blows. But the Korrath were relentless. A bolt grazed Alex's shoulder, the heat searing through his jacket, and he gritted his teeth against the pain. Another struck Zara'k's leg, forcing her to stumble with a sharp hiss. Still, they fought on, their resolve a shield against the enemy's numbers. When the last Korrath fell, his armor smoking and lifeless, Alex lowered his rifle, his chest heaving. Blood trickled from his shoulder, and Zara'k leaned heavily on her staff, a dark stain spreading across her leg. "More will come," she said, her voice strained but fierce. Alex tore a strip from his sleeve, wrapping it around his wound. "Then we need to move. Any way across this ravine." Zara'k scanned the edge, her eyes narrowing. "There," she said, pointing to a shadowed crevice where vines concealed a tunnel entrance. "It might lead us out." The tunnel was a gamble, but staying in the open wasn't an option. They slipped inside, the air cool and damp, the walls lined with glowing crystals that cast faint, eerie light. The passage twisted like a labyrinth, its uneven floor slick with moisture. The ground trembled faintly beneath their feet, a sign of instability, but they pressed on. The crystal's glow illuminated strange carvings, spirals, and geometric shapes that hinted at an ancient presence. Alex's curiosity stirred, but there was no time to linger. Then, a violent quake shook the tunnel, and with a deafening roar, the ceiling began to collapse. "Watch out!" Alex shouted, shoving Zara'k aside as a boulder crashed down. It missed her, but another struck her leg, pinning her beneath its weight. She gasped, clawing at the stone, her face contorted in pain. Hold on. Alex dropped to her side, his hands scrabbling at the boulder. It was heavy, unyielding, but he refused to give up. Zara'k, stay with me. Leave me, she rasped, her voice weak. Take the orb, get it to the stronghold. No chance in hell. Alex snapped, his voice fierce. He braced his shoulder against the rock, his muscles straining as he pushed with everything he had. Sweat beaded on his forehead, his breath coming in ragged gasps, but slowly the boulder shifted. With a final heave, he rolled it aside. Zara'k pulled free, her leg bruised and trembling but unbroken. She stared at him, her glowing eyes wide with something unreadable. Shock, gratitude, perhaps more. You saved me. Alex offered his hand, pulling her to her feet. We're in this together. Their fingers lingered for a heartbeat, the warmth of her touch grounding him amidst the chaos. Then, with a nod, they resumed their trek, the tunnel eventually spitting them out near the Zalthar stronghold. The sight that greeted them was grim. The stronghold lay in disarray, its towers cracked and smoking, its ground scarred with craters. The Korrath had struck in their absence, their attack leaving a trail of destruction. Warriors moved through the rubble, tending to the wounded and salvaging what they could, their faces etched with exhaustion. The central elder approached as they entered, his robes torn, his expression weary but resolute. You've returned, he said, his voice heavy with relief. But the Korrath grow bolder. They seek the orb. Zara'k pulled it from her pack, holding it out. We have it, and it may hold the key to our survival. The elder took it, his hands trembling slightly as he examined its swirling surface. Then we must unlock its secrets, quickly. Deep within the stronghold, in a chamber lined with crystalline panels, Zalthar scholars gathered around the orb. Holographic displays flickered to life as they worked, their fingers tracing patterns in the air. Alex and Zara'k stood nearby, tension coiling in their chests, their wounds hastily bandaged but still aching. After what felt like an eternity, a scholar, a wiry Zalthar with intricate tattoos, exclaimed, "It's a shield generator, a defense mechanism for the entire stronghold." Alex leaned over the display, studying the schematics. The design was complex, a lattice of energy conduits and crystalline amplifiers, but he recognized its potential. Can we build it? Yes, the scholar replied. But we need power crystals from the mountain caves and energy cells from your crashed ship. Zara'k met Alex's gaze, determination flashing in her eyes. We'll get them. Hurry. They split up, Zara'k leading a team to the caves, Alex to the explorer's wreckage. The ship lay a few miles from the stronghold, its hull cracked and blackened, but Alex salvaged what he could, prying loose 3 intact energy cells from the engine bay. His hands shook as he worked, the memory of his crew flashing through his mind, but he pushed it aside. There was no time for grief. By the time he returned, Zara'k and her team had hauled back a cache of glowing crystals, their surfaces pulsing with latent energy. Engineers swarmed the chamber, assembling the generator with feverish speed, the air buzzing with anticipation. At dawn, the Korrath struck again. A warship descended from the clouds, flanked by fighters, its hull bristling with weapons. Ground troops poured from transports, their armor gleaming as they advanced on the stronghold in a relentless wave. Alex and Zara'k took command, rallying the Zalthar warriors. Hold them off until the shield's up, Alex shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. The battle erupted in a storm of light and sound. Korrath fighters strafed the stronghold, their energy bolts tearing through stone and metal, while ground troops clashed with Zalthar defenders. Alex fired his plasma rifle in controlled bursts, each shot finding its mark, while Zara'k moved like a tempest, her staff striking with deadly precision. But the Korrath pressed forward, their numbers overwhelming. A massive siege engine lumbered into view, its cannons glowing with destructive intent, aimed at the stronghold's walls. We gotta stop that thing, Alex said, his eyes narrowing. Zara'k nodded, her staff sparking. It's heavily guarded, but we'll manage. They darted through the fray, using smoke and debris for cover. A Korrath squad blocked their path, 5 soldiers, their rifles blazing. Alex dove behind a shattered pillar, returning fire, while Zara'k charged, her staff a blur as she struck 2 down in quick succession. Alex took out another with a headshot, and together they dispatched the rest, their movements synchronized like a deadly dance. At the siege engine, Alex lobbed a plasma grenade into its core, the explosion shattering its frame in a fiery blast that sent shrapnel flying. The machine crumpled, its cannons silenced, but the victory was short-lived. From the smoke emerged a towering figure, the Korrath commander, his spiked armor gleaming, his blade crackling with dark energy. "You will fall," he snarled, his voice a guttural rumble. Alex raised his rifle, his jaw set. "Try us." The commander charged Zara'k, his blade clashing against her staff in a shower of sparks. He was fast, brutal, knocking her back with a vicious strike that sent her sprawling. Alex fired, his shots striking the commander's armor, distracting him long enough for Zara'k to recover. She rose, her staff glowing fiercely, and drove it into a crack in his plating. Alex followed with a final shot, piercing the commander's chest. The Korrath fell, his blade clattering to the ground, lifeless. The Korrath faltered at their leader's death, and the Zalthar seized the moment, driving them back with a renewed ferocity. As the enemy retreated, their warship pulling away into the clouds, a low hum filled the air. The shield generator sprang to life, its crystalline components pulsing as a shimmering dome enveloped the stronghold, casting a protective glow over the battered settlement. Cheers erupted from the Zalthar, their voices echoing through the dawn. Alex lowered his rifle, his body aching, his breath ragged. Zara'k stood beside him, her staff still in hand, her leg bandaged but steady. "We did it," Alex said, a faint smile breaking through his exhaustion. Zara'k nodded, her hand brushing his arm, her touch warm despite the chill of the morning. "For now, they'll return, stronger. Then we'll be ready," Alex replied, his fingers curling around hers for a brief, steadying moment. Together, their eyes met, a silent promise forged in the heat of battle, a bond that had grown stronger with every trial. As the first rays of sunlight pierced the horizon, they stood side by side, battered but unbroken, ready to face whatever came next. The twin suns of Zara'k, 5 hung low in the sky, their golden light filtering through a haze of smoke and dust that clung to the Zalthar stronghold. The air was heavy with the acrid scent of scorched stone and the faint, metallic tang of plasma discharge. Captain Alex Carter stood atop the ramparts, his plasma rifle cradled in his arms, its barrel still warm from the battle that had ended only hours ago. Beside him, Zara'k gripped her staff, its crystalline tip pulsing faintly, her glowing eyes fixed on the horizon. The victory over the Korrath commander had bought them time, but the tension in the air was palpable. A storm was brewing, and they both knew it. A deep rumble rolled through the sky, growing louder with each passing second. Alex's jaw tightened as he squinted into the distance. Dark shapes emerged from the clouds. A massive fleet of Korrath warships, their sleek, obsidian hulls gleaming with menace. At the forefront loomed a dreadnought, its hull bristling with crimson cannons that glowed with destructive intent, flanked by swarms of fighters that darted like predatory insects. This was no scouting party. It was an invasion force, come to crush the Zalthar once and for all. "They've brought everything they've got," Alex said, his voice steady but edged with urgency. Zara'k's grip on her staff tightened, her posture rigid. "They mean to end us today. We must hold them off." Below, the Zalthar warriors scrambled to their positions, their faces etched with determination despite the exhaustion that weighed on them. The shield generator, newly assembled with crystals from the mountain caves and energy cells from the explorer's wreckage, hummed to life at the stronghold center. Its crystalline components pulsed with a soft blue light, casting a shimmering dome over the settlement, a fragile barrier against the impending onslaught. "Activate the shield," Alex ordered, his voice carrying across the ramparts. The generator's hum intensified, the dome flaring brightly as it stabilized. Zalthar engineers darted around the device, fine-tuning its output, their hands trembling with the weight of their task. Alex watched the shield ripple under the first tentative volleys from the Korrath fighters, its surface absorbing the energy with a faint shimmer. It held, for now, but he knew it wouldn't withstand a sustained assault from the dreadnought. "We need to buy time," he said, turning to Zara'k. "If we can weaken their ground forces, it might slow their advance." She nodded, her eyes fierce. "Agreed. Let's lead the defense." They descended from the ramparts, joining the warriors at the stronghold's perimeter. The air buzzed with tension as the Zalthar formed defensive lines, their weapons staffs, blades, and energy rifles, glowing faintly in the dim light. Alex took position behind a barricade of salvaged metal and stone, his rifle trained on the tree line where the forest met the cliffside. Zara'k stood beside him, her staff crackling with suppressed energy, her presence a steadying force. The first wave came with a deafening roar. Drop pods streaked from the sky, crashing into the ground beyond the shield in bursts of dirt and glowing moss. From the pods emerged Korrath soldiers, their black armor reflecting the bioluminescent light of the forest, their rifles spitting crimson bolts that scorched the earth. Above, the dreadnought's cannons opened fire, each blast slamming into the shield with a force that sent tremors through the ground. The dome flared, its light flickering under the strain. "Here they come," Alex shouted, squeezing the trigger. A plasma bolt lanced through the air, striking a Korrath soldier in the chest and dropping him instantly. Zara'k unleashed a blast from her staff, the energy wave knocking 3 enemies off their feet. She moved with lethal grace, her strikes precise and devastating, each blow a testament to her warrior's skill. Together, they held the line, their teamwork seamless, Alex's tactical precision complementing Zara'k's raw power. But the Korrath were relentless. For every soldier they felled, 2 more took its place, their numbers swelling like a tide. The shield shuddered under the dreadnought's bombardment, cracks spiderwebbing across its surface as the generator groaned in protest. Below, engineers shouted warnings, their voices drowned out by the chaos. "It's not going to hold much longer," Alex grunted, ducking as a bolt sizzled past his head. He fired again, his shot piercing a Korrath helmet, but the enemy kept coming. Zara'k spun her staff, deflecting a barrage of fire, her breath coming in sharp gasps. "We need a new plan." Alex's mind raced, his training kicking into overdrive. He thought back to the orb's revelations, the ancient technology, its potential for both creation and destruction. Then, an idea struck him, desperate and reckless, but possibly their only chance. What if we overload the generator? Create a pulse that could fry their electronics, ships, weapons, everything. Zara'k's eyes widened, understanding dawning. "But that would destroy the generator and your ship's remaining systems. You'd be trapped here." Alex swallowed hard. The explorer was his lifeline to Earth, the last remnant of his old life. Sacrificing it meant abandoning any hope of returning home, of seeing his crew's families again to tell them what had happened. But he looked at the Zalthar warriors fighting around him, their faces set with courage despite the odds, and at Zara'k, whose fierce resolve mirrored his own. This was bigger than him now. "I know," he said softly, his voice steady despite the ache in his chest. "But it's the only way to stop them." Zara'k searched his face, her glowing eyes flickering with concern and something deeper, respect, perhaps, or the bond that had grown between them. "Are you certain?" He met her gaze, his resolve unshakable. "Yes." She nodded, a silent agreement passing between them. "Then we do it together." They fought their way to the generator chamber, the battle raging around them a blur of light and sound. Korrath soldiers breached the stronghold's outer defenses, their boots pounding the stone as they poured through gaps in the crumbling walls. Alex and Zara'k cut a path through the chaos, their weapons flashing, his rifle spitting plasma, her staff striking with electric fury. Inside the chamber, the generator pulsed erratically, its crystalline core glowing with an intensity that bordered on blinding. The air crackled with energy, the heat radiating from the device, palpable even from a distance. Engineers scrambled to stabilize it, their faces pale with fear as the shield outside flickered dangerously. "We need to overload it," Alex shouted over the din, rushing to the control panel. His fingers flew over the alien interface, piecing together what he'd learned from the scholars and his own technical expertise. Zara'k stood guard at the door, her staff a blur as she fended off a Korrath soldier who burst into the chamber. "Hurry, Alex! They're breaking through." The ground shook violently, a deafening crack echoing as the shield began to collapse. Through the chamber's viewport, Alex saw the dreadnought's main cannon charging, a massive weapon capable of leveling the stronghold in a single shot. Time was running out. He rerouted the power, pushing the generator beyond its limits. The hum rose to a piercing whine, the light intensifying until it seared his retinas. "It's ready," he called, stepping back. Zara'k joined him at the panel, her hand finding his. "Together," she said, her voice a steady anchor amidst the storm. He squeezed her hand, drawing strength from her touch. Together, the energy built to a crescendo, the air vibrating with power. Then, as the dreadnought's cannon reached full charge, they triggered the overload. A blinding wave of energy erupted from the generator, tearing through the chamber and surging outward in a brilliant pulse that swept across the battlefield and into the sky. Just before the pulse exploded, Zara'k had clasped Alex's hand, her grip fierce and unyielding, a mix of defiance and trust that anchored them both. As the energy surged, the roar engulfing them, their eyes locked. In that fleeting instant, there was no fear, no doubt, only a shared understanding that transcended words. Her glowing eyes held a storm of emotion he couldn't fully name, and his own reflected the resolve and connection that had grown between them. It was a moment of unity, their bond forged in sacrifice, a silent promise that whatever happened, they would face it as one. The pulse washed over Zara'k, 5 like a tidal wave of light. Through the viewport, Alex watched as the Korrath fleet faltered, the fighters stuttering and plummeting, the dreadnought's systems frying in a cascade of sparks. The massive ship listed to one side, its cannons going dark, before crashing into the forest in a fiery explosion that shook the ground. On the battlefield, Korrath soldiers dropped their weapons, their armor's electronics dead, and the Zalthar seized the moment, driving the invaders back with a triumphant roar. In the chamber, the generator shattered. Crystals burst apart, showering the room with glowing shards that tinkled against the stone floor. The shockwave hurled Alex and Zara'k against the wall, their bodies colliding as they slid to the ground. When the light faded, silence fell, broken only by the hiss of cooling metal and their ragged breathing. Alex pushed himself up, wincing as pain flared in his shoulder. Beside him, Zara'k stirred, her hand still clasped in his, her staff lying nearby. "We did it," he rasped, disbelief mingling with relief. Zara'k's lips curved into a faint smile, her grip tightening. "Yes, we did." But as the adrenaline faded, the reality sank in. The generator was slag, its components melted beyond repair. And with it, the last energy cells from the Explorer were gone, their circuits fried by the pulse. Alex was stranded on Zara'k, 5, his way home lost forever. He stood, helping Zara'k to her feet, and they stepped outside. The Zalthar cheered, their voices echoing through the stronghold as they celebrated their victory. The forest glowed faintly beyond the walls, its bioluminescent light untouched by the chaos, a stark contrast to the scarred settlement. As night fell, Alex stood on a balcony overlooking the landscape, the twin suns dipping below the horizon in a blaze of crimson and violet. The air was cool, carrying the scent of the forest and the faint tang of smoke. Zara'k joined him, her presence a quiet comfort, her leg bandaged but steady. "You gave up everything," she said softly, her voice tinged with awe. "Your ship, your world." Alex turned to her, his expression weary but resolute. "It was worth it. This fight, these people, you." I couldn't let the Korrath win. She stepped closer, her glowing eyes searching his. You are not alone, Alex. The Zalthar honor your sacrifice. You have a home here with us. He smiled, a warmth spreading through him despite the ache of loss. With you. Their hands found each other again, fingers lacing together in a gesture that felt natural, inevitable. Zara'k leaned in, her forehead touching his, a Zalthar sign of trust and intimacy. You've proven your heart matches your courage, she murmured. We face the future together. Alex's breath hitched, his pulse quickening at her closeness. I'd like that. As the stars emerged in the night sky, twinkling above the glowing forest, a sense of peace settled over him. He had lost his way back to Earth, but he had gained something greater, a new family, a new purpose, and a bond with Zara'k that promised more than he'd ever expected. The Korrath would return, stronger and smarter, but for now, victory was theirs. And with Zara'k by his side, he was ready for whatever came next.